The Central Staffer tool allows managers and schedulers to easily float employees between units by displaying all published shifts within a selected 24-hour period. Users choose the date, time range, and departments they want to view, then float staff by simply dragging and dropping a shift to another unit or using the right-click float option. The system allows floating full or partial shifts, and managers can adjust the time segment and choose what happens to the remaining hours. Float codes can be applied so departments can see where staff were reassigned to better manage daily staffing across departments. Ready to see the Central Staffer tool in action? Let's take a look at the step-by-step process. Welcome. The Central Staffer tool allows leaders and schedulers to view staffing across units and float team members between departments using a simple drag and drop or right-click workflow. Using the Central Staffer tool, you may view up to a 24-hour period of staffing across selected departments. Display published schedules only. Float staff between departments. Float either full or partial shifts. Assign staff into open, unassigned shifts or into departments with no open slots by creating a new float shift, or adjust float codes and schedule adjustment codes when appropriate. Let's take a closer look at this process. Just as a reminder, after logging into Infor WFM, you can select Sent Staff in the blue header bar to access the Central Staffing tool. Now, let's set the date and time parameters for floating a shift. To do this, enter a date or use the calendar icon to select a date. Then, select a start and end time range. Once these parameters are set, only shifts within this window of time will display. Next, let's set the content parameters. Select the magnifying glass icon on the gray bar. The selection parameters display. You may search for departments you have access to using the lookup icon, or you may type in a department number. When typing multiple department numbers, use a comma to separate each number, with no space, as shown. You may also filter by job, team member names, or activity, as shown in the drop-down list. You may filter for skills, which may be team member or shift-based. For the schedule status, you may select scheduled, unscheduled, or unassigned shifts. You may also select the checkbox to exclude off shifts. Once all parameters have been entered, you will click the blue Load button. Take note that, when the Load button displays a yellow triangle in the corner, this means that new parameters were selected and must be loaded. Select Load. The Central Staffer tool will display any HR departments selected, along with all the scheduling jobs beneath each HR code. You may toggle between two screen views, grouping by department or by job. Grouping by department displays each scheduling job and team member shifts, as shown. To toggle to grouping by job, select the screen toggle grouping icon in the gray bar at the top right of the screen. It looks like two squares interlinked. As the name suggests, this view displays team members from all departments under each job role. This tends to be more confusing when floating shifts, so most users switch back to the department view. Select the toggle grouping icon to return to the previous view. There are two ways to float team members between departments. The first method is by drag and drop. Let's float a nursing shift using drag and drop. Select the down arrow to expand the nurse shift display. Now, let's expand the view of the nursing shifts for the department this team member will float to. Select the down arrow. With both department nurse shift listings displayed, you have two options: drag the team member to an open or unfilled shift in the target department, or drag them to the department name itself. Note, dragging to the department name creates a new shift, rather than filling an unassigned shift. Let's drag team member number 3 to an unfilled shift. Select team member number 3 to move them to another shift in department 10086. This shift is ready to be dragged to a new location. Select the shift to move it to an unassigned shift location in the second department column. As shown, the first unassigned shift is an 8 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. 12-hour shift. Select the shift to drag it to that new location. You may also drag to the department number, as shown in blue, to float this team member to that department. Select team member number 3 to drag them by department number. The Float Shifts dialog box displays. Let's assign a shift label. Select the shift label lookup icon. You may scroll the pages to locate and select the correct shift, or enter the shift in the shift display label field. Let's select that field to enter the shift 8P12. Now, select the shift label as displayed. To complete the float transaction, select Submit. You can also float a team member for a partial shift. To begin, select team member 3 and drag them to the department column label to open the float shifts window. You will still select a shift label, then enter the partial shift start and end time. Since only a partial shift was selected, you will need to account for the remaining time. Select the scroll bar to scroll down. Select a relief status to leave the partial remaining shift unfilled, in pending status, or relief not needed, or RNN. Once this is complete, select Submit to complete the partial float. You may also float a team member multiple times over a shift period, if needed. For example, you may wish to float team member number 4 from Department A 10084 to Department B 10086, for a partial shift. Then, based on another need, float them from Department B to Department C, 10088. You will need to account for those partial float hours across those 3 shifts. Let's review how that's done. Starting out in the Central Staffing tool, you will set your date and shift start and end time ranges. Next, select the magnifying glass and adjust any of these selection parameters. Then, select the Load button. To begin your shift float, you can either drag an employee from one department location to another, or you may right-click to select Mark for Float. Next, in the Float Shifts window, select the appropriate shift label and time block for that first partial shift. Then, select Submit. Then, start the process over again, this time selecting HR Departments B and C to complete the partial float to the third shift location. For this final segment, let's determine when to use float codes versus adjustment codes. Use the float code, flow or float, when floating someone from one unit to another, and you want the sending unit to see where the staff member went. Use the adjustment code, ADJ, when removing someone from a schedule. You cannot delete or unassign the shift, or you need a neutral non-pay code. You have completed this process. And that's how to utilize the schedule details edit and mass edit functions in Infor WFM. Thank you for watching this help clip.